Hello everyone, this is part 3 of What If Naruto Was the Perfect Shinobi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto arrived at the designated training ground not long following his talk with Kurenai. He hadn't had to pass through Konoha proper as the location was rather close to the academy. That was too bad. The villagers' glares and curses might have served to get him into the more homicidal mood that he was likely to need here. The area seemed to be completely deserted, but that couldn't be correct. The demon carrier didn't detect any illusionary genjutsu either, though that didn't necessarily mean that there wasn't one. A scared Junin would no doubt be able to mask the technique well enough that he wouldn't be able to easily sense its presence. Still, the odds were that the woman was hiding somewhere within the vicinity. Behind you, brat. The demon's warning caused more harm than help. The kunai that would have simply grazed his inline instead plunged deep into his shoulder due to his accidentally twisting into its flight path in an attempt to dodge. Naruto grunted in pain and surprise as the blade tore a hole in his white muscle shirt and lodged near to the bone. Blood oozed out like a sieve and stained and ruined the garment. The demon container yanked the kunai loose and glared up into the nearby tree from whence it had been thrown. His prospective sensei sat lazily on a sturdy branch with her legs crossed and sporting a rather insane grin. The bleeding soon halted and the wound began healing over due to the Kyuubi's intervention, though it would still take at least another hour to repair totally. This bloodthirsty bee had cut him pretty deep and her expression betrayed that she wasn't the least bit apologetic about having done it. But two could play that game. She was quite the sight to behold, he thought. She was dressed in a rather provocative netted bodysuit that revealed enough skin to be deemed as rather obscene. Over that indecent garment she wore a short leather skirt that at least managed to obscure her most private places along with a matching coat very similar to Naruto's, except that hers still had the sleeves where he had removed his. Her femininity was an outright tsunami in comparison to Kurenai's subtle ripple. And similar to the red-eyed woman, Mitarashi Anko's eyes were most distinctive. Her irises were a yellowish brown and large like a snake's and she seemed to have no visible pupils. Still, whatever allure she might have possessed was overshadowed by her having tossed a kunai into Naruto's shoulder. She slid down to ground level with a sensual grace that suited her somewhat serpentine nature. So I guess you're the punk that Hokage-sama wants me to train. And you're Mitarashi Anko. All those terrible rumors seem to hold some truth. Naruto stared back down at the bloody kunai in his right hand as he spoke and the obviously addled Junin's previous grin widened into a complete smirk when she nodded. He blinked and tossed the blade back to her. He wouldn't have been able to hit her with a return throw anyway and attempting would have accomplished little save angering her. She caught the projectile with practiced ease. He looked on with disgust as Anko brought the weapon near her mouth and proceeded to sensually lick Naruto's dripping blood clean as though she were performing a similar act on some lucky, or perhaps not so given her questionable mental state, man. Sorry, 'bout that, kid. Though it was really your mistake. I only meant to give you a little tickle. At least you've got good instincts. Didn't expect you to sense that kunai coming. Again, her tone and mannerisms exhibited that she wasn't at all genuinely sorry. I'll survive, though you could have just said hello instead. But there's no fun in that. And you taste really good, too. Anyway, you've been sent out here to become my apprentice. The old man tells me you're some kinda prodigy and really good with your ninjutsu. That doesn't mean S to me. I've never taken students up to this day and I sure as hell don't feel like wasting my time with you either. So you're going to prove to me that training you is worth my energy, right here and now. Naruto watched the woman warily, but was nonetheless determined. Not many would talk about the Hokage with such a reverence. He was already starting to like Anko a bit. Very well, then. I expected that. Tell me what I have to do to become your pupil. It's real simple, kid. All you've got to do is draw blood on me in a spar. I'm not going to bother trying to teach some green genin. Show me that you're as advanced as the Hokage brags and that you have a sack down there. Otherwise you can go back and climb trees with Kurenai and the other brats. Naruto smiled inwardly. Nice and straightforward, just how he liked things. This apparently wasn't some ridiculous spiritual test with an inner meaning. The only problem was actually managing to injure the volatile kunoichi. The demon container somehow knew that she wasn't going to make this easy on him, though she would probably pull her punches to a large degree. Or at least he hoped that Mitarashi Anko wasn't crazy enough to actually maim him. This sounds entertaining. Whenever you're ready. Naruto relaxed into a practiced but seldom applied shinobi stance. This would mark the only true combat test that he had ever had. His previous experience sparring against other shinobi was limited to having easily whipped Kiba in a couple isolated bouts back at the Genin Academy. His other battles had been against non-shinobi and had been laughably easy victories. The Kyuubi vessel took a second to weigh his options. Attempting to hide and wait would be pointless. There were no teammates or other shinobi present to divert the Junin's attention and give him an opening, and he would have to blow his cover to attack her eventually regardless. That cage bunshin technique might provide a suitable smokescreen but would likely not work and would squander much chakra in the process. Anko slid into her own stance and uttered a stipulation that completely shattered his plan. One more thing, you're not allowed to use any chakra techniques. Naruto grit his teeth at the saccharine smirk on the kunoichi's lips. She must really not want anything to do with training him. This meant that his arsenal would be limited to throwing weapons and basic taijutsu, and he sadly excelled at neither. He really wished that he had thought to bring that stolen katana to this test. He had no training whatsoever regarding how to properly use it, but the additional reach still would have somewhat increased his chances to land a hit on this woman. That a rather large handicap. Tough s, brat. The world ain't always fair, especially to us shinobi. I'm not trying to learn how many damned jutsus you know. Any moron can memorize hand seals and build chakra. I'm testing you as a person. I want to see whether or not you really have what it takes inside to be my apprentice. So stop standing there and come at me, you little SS Tane. Show me what you've got. That was true. The world had never treated Uzumaki Naruto right. He had risen to his current position against all the odds. And he was not going to be derailed by this test or by the psychopath giving it either. She was somebody that he could respect and he liked her attitude, but she was going to be made to bleed somehow. He would make her accept him. With no techniques allowed, there was only avenue by which to proceed. He concentrated his chakra into his leg muscles in order to boost his speed and charged. The demon carrier's kick was sloppy and poorly timed, and the Junin dodged it with nonchalant ease. Naruto growled and tried to sweep her legs, but that missed as well. The demon carrier was set to transition into a punching combination, but Anko beat him to the attack, sending him sprawling with a quick uraken to the jaw. Naruto spat up some blood and bared his teeth as he pushed back upright. Nice punch. I don't think I've ever been hit that hard. Anko shrugged, that same insane grin on her face. And you couldn't hit the Hokage monument on the broadside. Shut up and fight. Naruto withdrew the kunai that he always kept at his boot and rushed at his adversary again. He was rather angry at this point, and his swipes were wild and inaccurate as a consequence. Anko evaded them with no trouble and countered the third berserk swing with two quick attacks using the blade that she had used to el the demon vessel's shoulder earlier. Naruto experienced stinging sensations on his inline and at his side, and only then realized that he had been cut again. He was getting his ass kicked. Even more humbling was that Anko wasn't even trying to attack him outright and was doing nothing save evading and countering his inadequate attacks. You look fancy with all that blood running down your cheek, you know. The demon container ignored the attempt to rile him up more. Obviously the direct approach was not going to work. He was wasting stamina and Anko's counterblows were beginning to take a serious toll on him. And yet the only distance attack he could use involved throwing his one kunai, or about the 6 or so shuriken that he had in his pouch. Against Mitarashi Anko's vastly superior speed, the strategy seemed a waste. Then again, he could always be a bit more daring and cage bunshin no jutsu. To hell with the rules. Naruto was a shinobi, and there was nothing more important than completing one's mission. 12 Naruto copies rushed at Anko, who quirked an eyebrow. The demon container wasn't sure whether she was impressed that he could do the restricted technique or indignant that he had disobeyed her instructions. The real spiky blonde leapt back into the nearby trees, using the clones as a diversion. The kunoichi wouldn't take long to obliterate them, so Naruto had to act quickly. He laid down a quick illusionary genjutsu to obscure the general area and buy a precious couple more seconds and moved to a good vantage point and started doing hand seals. Anko destroyed the buncheons with her kunai and glanced directly up to where their creator was standing. The illusion had been useless, but it didn't matter now. Kaiten, Hatama. The demon carrier repeatedly spammed the basic two-seal Kaiten jutsu and sent small fireballs in a barrage in Anko's direction. They were weak attacks, but they also weren't designed to hit her. He aimed the balls to spray the ground near her and back her up towards a distant tree grove. He smirked as she cursed like a sailor and dodged the attacks but was still being pushed right in the direction that he had planned. Once Anko was in position, Naruto made the seals to unleash a power technique that would bring his opponent down hard and stretched his right palm out while using the other to brace it. Raiten, Bunkaten no Rakurai. Electricity gathered in a large sphere in Naruto's outstretched palm. A huge lightning bolt blasted outward from the orb and sailed towards the grove. This one mammoth beam separated into about a dozen smaller bolts at the median between the two. The trees blasted ablaze and exploded upon impact. He had deliberately aimed so as not to KO or seriously injure her, but she didn't imagine she'd be getting up soon either. The explosions wouldn't hit her, but the resulting shockwave would put her down. He waited as the smoke cleared, but right as he was about to get a clear vision, a hand wrenched his hair and a kunai pressed up against his T. Nice try, but not quite good enough. At least you've got some balls though. Most other genin wouldn't have dared to break the rules. Anko's breath was hot and dangerous in his ear, similar and yet so much not so as Ayami's had been earlier. Naruto certainly had no naughty thoughts about this situation. At the spot where the Junin should have been knocked out near the grove sat a splintered log. The demon container had been bested by the Kawarimi. The absolute most basic technique taught at the academy. There are no rules in battle. All that matters is winning. That's right, kid. It's good to see you understand that. Too bad your battle is over. He had to admit, it was tough to argue with a blade pressed into a vital spot. He wasn't prepared to accept losing yet, though. Anko wasn't going to seriously injure him. That much had been made apparent by her holding back during the entire test up to the present. Naruto stomped hard on the tree branch that the two were standing on. The wooden appendage snapped and both Genin and Junin went sailing towards the ground. Anko abandoned her hold on the demon carrier and rappelled against the nearby tree trunk to roll back and land upright. Naruto hadn't the time to do the same but still landed gingerly against the tree's base. He shook out the cobwebs but only had time enough to glimpse the kunoiki's still grinning visage as she pointed her arm at him and 3 summoned snakes escaped her trench coat sleeve and bound him to the tree trunk. He was not physically weak by any stretch, but his strength was useless against the coiling serpents. Naruto was completely immobilized, not able to move even an inch. Amusement danced through Mitarashi Anko's snake-like eyes as she observed his plight. You've done pretty damn good up to now, but give it up. There's no escaping this. The snakes squeezed the demon carrier tighter every time he tried to resist their hold. Numbness began to set in as the constricting serpents slowed the circulation in the Uzumaki's limbs. He had to escape immediately or else he would lose consciousness. Fortunately his arms were only bound at the biceps, allowing him to move his hands together to make seals. He did so without drawing attention to the action by keeping Anko's rather sadistic attention occupied through making audible choking and wheezing noises. The Saiteki na Karada was a Raiten technique that released intense static electricity through the user's skin pores. Completely useless in most situations, but it was exactly what was needed here. Anko's shadow snakes hissed loudly as they retreated away immediately. He used the tree as a springboard and hurled his body at the Junin kunoiki as soon as he was loose. He knew that he wasn't going to get another opening and that he had to make this one count. Naruto was already on Anko by the time she managed to come to terms with what had happened, wrestling her to the ground and mounting her. The demon container then realized that he no longer had his kunai and had most likely dropped it upon his landing. He held her weapon at bay with one hand and used his superior size to dominate the kunoiki in their position. Grappling was one art that most shinobi were not scared in at all, and Anko was no exception. Among Konoha's ninja clans only the sumo-styled Akamaiki incorporated it into their training at all. Naruto wasn't a properly trained wrestler either, but over the years an improvised variant had come to replace traditional shinobi martial arts in his arsenal. His own grappling was more akin to street combat than anything proper or technical. This was the only moment in the entire spar in which the spiked blonde held the advantage. Since he couldn't cut her due to having no blade on hand, he would have to use his bare hands to get the job done. He raised an arm to deliver a vicious strike when a pleasant sensation in his nether regions broke his concentration. So kinky. Didn't know you had it in ya, brat. The adolescent demon container whimpered pathetically as Anko massaged his sea with steady and experienced hands. He became all too aware that her legs were spread wide due to their mutual position and that the manner in which he was mounted atop her could easily be mistaken as something much raunchier by an observer. Anko easily noticed his discomfort and relished in making it worse. The woman rubbed her hardly covered skin against Naruto's body and nipped at his ear, batting his lobe with her tongue and then dipping the probing organ inside to take a taste. Stop this. Her response was deceptively sweet and gentle. I don't think so, kiddo. Because you've done so well up to now, I've decided to give ya some extra special early lessons. Lesson 1. Never leave your weak spots unprotected. Lesson 2. Never let your target get into your head. With those words, Anko roughly grabbed onto poor Naruto's private area and twisted mercilessly. The demon vessel gasped out a scream as pain overrode his senses. A second twist was accompanied by a nasty headbutt that sent the spiked blonde staggering up and a kick to the sternum that pushed him back against the same tree he had previously been bound to. The Junin was up quickly and pressed her trusty kunai into his shoulder joint. Not coincidentally, this was the same point where she had impaled him with her initial greeting. The steel blade stung like hell as the tip dug into the raw wound. At least he was rather relieved that her seduction had only been a psychological ploy and that she wasn't genuinely trying to get into his pants. The age gap was a bit much. Very good, beating my snake hand. But no more tricks. Naruto glanced down at the tree's roots and saw his kunai sitting in the moss. Anko trailed his vision as intercepted his attempt to grab it. She twisted his right bicep and dislocated his shoulder with a sickening pop. Still, the injury had been worth capturing her attention. He immediately raised his other arm and yanked her purple pineapple ponytail backward to keep her in place. The demon carrier then let out a shriek as he propelled his body at the kunoiki and impaled his own shoulder clean through to the bone on her kunai. The momentum allowed him to headbutt her in the mouth, his high-tie 8 sing directly against Anko's grinning lips. He let her hair go and watched as she stumbled back on rubbery legs with a dazed expression. Naruto breathed out in triumph as the blood began trickling down her chin. He had busted Anko's lower lip wide open. He had passed the test and she was honor bound to train him. I win, Anko-san. I've passed your little test. The kunoiki's tongue darted out and licked her lips and chin, tasting her own essence. Those yellowish-brown snake eyes widened and she looked at her apparent new student with a tangible respect. Anko looked down at his completely destroyed shoulder and shook her head in exasperation as she pulled the kunai loose. Why, you crazy little bastard, yeah, I guess you did. Come on, you need the hospital. Anko's voice wasn't as boisterous as it had been earlier. He had apparently nailed her pretty hard with that headbutt. She bent down and reset the demon Kaia's dislocated shoulder as well as she was able and picked him up by the waist. Naruto was in no condition to even walk. His one shoulder had been cut to shreds and the other torn by the ligaments. He was bruised and cut all over and was still having a hard time breathing thanks to the kunoiki's shadow snakes, and he could swear that he had cracked a rib or two due to his tree plunge. Still, he didn't want to be carried to the hospital. The demon had always managed to heal his wounds in the past and going to get medical treatment would look weak. He also didn't care to deal with having the medic nins glare at him. There's no need. I've always been able to heal quickly. I'll be alright by tomorrow. Bulls, kid. You're going whether you like it or not. At the least you can keep your sensei company while she has her damn jaw fixed. You know, I just remembered that I never told you my name. Don't be an idiot. Everybody around here knows who you are, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto objected no more and simply let her sling his less damaged arm over her shoulders and drag his weight away to the ninja hospital. Having somebody care enough to drag him to get treated when he was wounded was nice anyway, even though said person had been the one to cause the damage. He laid his head back against his new sensei's and let his legs carry him under her direction as he closed his weary eyes. You sure got your tail kicked, kid. That was pathetic. Naruto did not need this right now. He was hurt and tired and didn't want to be taunted. Shut up, Barker Fox. I didn't hear you making any offers to help out. The Kyuubi chuckled darkly in amusement inside Naruto's mind. Remember who this woman answers to. We can't have the third knowing about our connection, you know that. Besides, you needed to do this alone. You're not ever going to become stronger by using me as a crutch, and this woman's training will help us to reach new heights. I understand. Now let me get some rest. I'm so tired. The demon departed back into Naruto's subconscious as he at last succumbed to exhaustion and blood loss. The last thing he heard was Anko's cursing accompanied by a loud booming voice coming closer. D-rank missions sucked. Naruto made this conclusion upon completing Team 8's initial exercise. He really didn't consider doing some idiot villager's lawn work to be worth his time at all. This morning the team was set to cleaning out the kennel cages at Konoha's animal shelter. They had arrived at the site only moments ago. The demon container wrinkled his nose in utter disdain at the septic stench that dominated the place. This is so gross. I can't believe we have to do this crap. Naruto smirked at Ino's screeching complaint. The truth was that he still more or less disliked the loudmouthed Yamanaka. Despite that, he was starting to at least accept her as a teammate. She had surprised him by actually stopping by the hospital to visit him during his 2-day mandated observation period. Kiba and Kurenai had both called on him several times, as had Anko. The Hokage had dropped in once also to inquire about his recovery. Sandaime had understandably not been able to stay long due to having other matters to attend to. Still, the spiky blonde was rather touched that Konoha's venerable leader would make time to visit him in convalescence despite all his other obligations. Naruto hadn't even needed to be in the hospital. The Kyuubi had completely healed him in less than 6 hours, but the medic nins wouldn't cave into his demands to be cleared. Naruto was convinced that they had kept him against his will just to torment him. 2 weeks had passed since his having been demolished by Anko in the sparring match. His beloved leather trench coat and pants had both somehow disappeared as he rested during that initial collapse. Anko-sensei still denied having any knowledge pertaining to their whereabouts. During that time he had completed 3 basic missions with his team and had also spent 6 hours in training with his personalized instructor every day that neither had a mission. He was making progress. Anko had already taught him her trademark snake hand technique. He could bring out the serpents but could not control them very well. To do that properly he would need a proper summoning contract with the snakes. Attempting to call out the serpent boss Manda and obtain his patronage would be the next item on their training agenda. Stop your damned bing, Ino. This ain't that bad. Don't tell me what to do, dog breath. I can say whatever I want. Listening to Ino and Kiba bicker was starting to become a usual pastime during missions. The mutt doesn't get it, Yamanaka. This place is just like home to him. Naruto's interjection received the typical Inuzuka response. F you, Naruto. And stop taking her side. We guys are supposed to stick together. I'm loyal to whichever side suits me at the moment. There you go with that badass routine again. Give it up, Uzumaki. Nobody's buying it. Several dogs in the kennels starting barking along with the Genin team's argument. Kurenai had taken the opportunity to duck out to run some errand or another. He didn't blame her. He sure as hell didn't want to be around this stinky dog pound. The demon container glimpsed one particularly ugly resident while surveying the area, a spotted bee that was missing a leg and an eye. She was howling particularly noisily. Your sister's calling, Kiba. Better go see what she wants. Kiba narrowed his eyes and looked where Naruto indicated with his thumb and sneered. Oh yeah, that's just hilarious. I'll remember to pass that little remark on to Hana when she comes home. She's out on a mission now, but I'm quite sure she'll be more than willing to cut your big whiskered ass down to size when she gets back. Naruto only shrugged nonchalantly. I welcome the challenge. But until then we should get these bulls' missions done the smart way. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto made the requisite seals and expended more chakra than normal to create about 30 clones. He ordered them to clean the kennels while he and his 2 teammates watched and waited at the entrance, refusing to do anything other than supervise. The work was done in less than an hour. That was a really cool technique, Uzumaki-san. Naruto sighed. He would much rather Ino stop calling him that. Being addressed so formally was rather annoying, but coming out and saying so was more bothersome and might also make her think that he considered her to be an actual comrade or something. Whereupon he only nodded and banished his clones. At least she was starting to talk less about the Uchiha and not acting quite so girlish while on missions with the team. It's nothing that impressive. Several Junin in this village know and use it. Naturally the mutt couldn't keep his yap closed. That was what made him so endearing. The Inuzuka clapped him on the back and smirked. He's so humble. A genin using elite-level jutsus and not thinking anything about it. Ino joined in the teasing also. Naruto wondered what he had done to become the target. That's right, and ruggedly handsome too. He's almost as dreamy as Sasuke-kun. Only then did Naruto realize his mistake. The cage bunshin was a restricted technique, and should word get out that he knew it, he would likely be implicated in having stolen the Kinjutsu scroll that contained the instructions to use it. That wouldn't be a problem except that he actually had the damn thing in his possession. He had used the technique once against Anko during their battle, but doubted that his sensei had thought much about it. On the other hand, Kiba and especially Ino were liable to open their mouths to others who would seize upon the chance to use the knowledge against him. He would have to return the scroll to the Hokage soon and hope that he could avoid any serious punishment. He was enraged inside about having made such a moronic and pointless blunder. You're both beginning to try my patience. Chill out, Naruto. Nothing to get uppity about, you see Thang Yu. The demon vessel was both embarrassed and pissed. Those around him had never dared mock him so casually in the past. Even the big-mouthed Kiba had always known his limits. With this burgeoning team, those particular barriers were dissipating and he didn't like it one bit. True hatred was something that he had always been accustomed to and could retaliate against in kind. He didn't know how to deal with this light-hearted teasing at all. He smirked and decided to get his back. Some quick hand seals, and snakes. I hate snakes. Get rid of them. Naruto watched as his shadow snakes shot out and snapped at the other two genin. Ino's screaming was a less than pleasant sound, but their startled reactions were well worth having his eardrums assaulted. He wasn't wearing anything with sleeves, and so they visibly materialized right in his wrist skin. The stray dogs in the kennel didn't like the summoned serpents either and raised a clamor. Akamaru growled at one back but backed away, whining when it hissed back. The dog was every bit as craven as its master. The demon container wondered when Kurenai would be back. The team couldn't leave until she dismissed them, and he had better things to do than standing around here. We get the point, Naruto. Now reverse this damned genjutsu already. The spiky blonde raised an inquisitive eyebrow. These are no illusions, Kiba. Seriously, you're both such scared little children. The demon container retracted the shadow snakes lazily. He had rather enjoyed watching them squirm. Anko sensei's perverse tendencies had to be making an impact upon him. Naruto wouldn't have even bothered to care about playing such mind games with his two teammates a week or so prior. He would have only scowled and ignored them. That wasn't very nice, Naruto. Naruto grinned sadistically at Ino in an attempt to imitate Anko's trademark expression. You didn't call me Uzumaki-san, Yamanaka. That was rude and improper. Ino blanched as though he had threatened to K her, and given his usual temperament the idea wasn't lacking in proper cause. He had gotten those two but good with the snakes. Yamanaka and the mutt wouldn't be taking any liberties with the demon vessel again anytime soon. Naruto was right back in the dominant position where he belonged. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Naruto airily waved her apology away. Don't worry about it. Naruto suits me better. Tell Kurenai-san that I went to train. The demon carrier then departed, leaving two bewildered teammates standing at the kennel. He wasn't going to act outright hostile to them when they weren't doing so to him. Most people thought Naruto to hate everybody indiscriminately, but that wasn't the case at all. Only those in Konoha who treated him like dirt. Everybody else he tended to be rather passive towards. The hedgehog bared its spines only when threatened. But neither would it do to have the other two genin assume that the terrible Uzumaki Naruto's edge was beginning to blunt. And so he had scared him a little. He was now starting to view them as genuine companions as opposed to total inconveniences, but he wasn't about to let them know it. 2 days later, Naruto entered training ground 19 at the usual training time. Several other genin teams were up and drilling with the sunrise, but Mitarashi Anko was not at all receptive to leaving her bed even a mere second earlier than her internal clock made her, and as a consequence Naruto started later in the morning. Sensei and Gakusei hadn't met the last 2 days because one or the other had been sent on mission. As per the usual, the unslayed Junin was nowhere in plain sight. Every time they convened to train, the spiky blonde would get cut somewhere or the other due to her customized greeting. And no sooner had the processed the thought, a kunai passed by and made a small incision above his hairline. Naruto scowled as a couple severed blonde locks passed through his vision on the descent to the ground. At least you've learned not to move into it. Someday you might even dodge it. The second sentence sounded rather more garbled than the other, as though the speaker were talking and chewing at the same time. Naruto heard a loud swallow as he turned to where the noise had originated. Anko sat cross-legged in a tree picking at her teeth with a used dango skewer. The kunoiki's obsession with those little rice balls was ridiculous. Morning, sensei. Whatever, brat. Here. I've got something to give ya. Naruto smirked and gave a mocking little bow. Anko gave a maniacal grin and heaved a large green parcel down to him. He raised an brow and tried to catch it with one arm. The package turned out to be much heavier than it appeared, and the demon carrier used his second arm to counterbalance it but still collapsed. He scrambled back to his standing base and tore it open. He discovered that it contained his missing trench, which now somehow weighed well over 100 pounds. The outside remained the same, but upon examining the inside he discovered that small bulging patches had been sewn in a haphazard manner all over his expensive overcoat. Training weights. Some dimwit had stat thing weights into his best ensemble and done poor work in doing so. This is the worst tailoring I've ever seen. Anko let out a sheepish smile and scratched her head. See, it's a kinda strange tale. You passed out 2 weeks ago. Mato guy helped me lug your worthless ass into the hospital. While you were conked on the bed we two started discussing some things, well, more like I tried to talk a little and guy shouted a lot. So I guess I blurted out something about your taijutsu not being quite up to scratch. He started bellowing on about youth and snatched up that coat, marched out like he was on some crusade. I didn't have the heart to stop him. I think he even patched all the weights in on his own time. Naruto shook his head in disgust. He slipped the trench on and tried not to slouch over due to the added weight. His pants were still gone. The demon vessel imagined that Guy had tried to alter those also and had ruined them beyond repair. He then took his stolen katana that had been latched to his waist and attached the case to a hook on the coat's exterior. He had started carrying it upon getting his medical clearance. Naruto still didn't know how to use it, but it couldn't hurt to have around. The blade would have spared him much pain and harm during his battle with Anko 2 weeks prior. And it made him look so much more intimidating. All he had to do was place his hand on the grip when some villager glared or spat at him and the moron would go running. Well, it's good to know my sensei is so responsible. She puts me in the emergency room and then lets some weirdo steal my clothes. Anko shrugged and slid down to the ground in her usual sensual style. Hey, show some gratitude. Guy came up to me the next morning and demanded that I send you out to train with him and his protege in the early mornings. I could have been really inhumane and allowed it. He still sent something in case I changed my mind. Stretch out that wrapping cloth and take a look. Naruto did so and stared gobsmacked at what he saw, a green spandex training suit. Well, now I have something to use as a target next time I do jutsu practice. Take care to leave it out somewhere he can see it. Now let's get to work. We'll spar 2 hours and then take a shot at calling Manda. The spiked blonde nodded and the two went at one another. He was getting a bit better at reading her moves and responding to them. He still had yet to land a single substantial hit on his specialized Junin sensei and still looked like he had been run through a meat processor at each spar's end, but he was making steady improvement nonetheless. During this encounter he was able to use the katana to keep her honest to a degree. Anko was the slightest bit wary about closing in to bust his chops when he had a razor-sharp steel blade to swing at her. Naruto couldn't even come close to hitting her accurately, but there was the chance that an isolated lucky swipe might catch her. The demon container had also gotten a good chop in on her shadow snakes when she sent them at him. That had only gotten her temper roused and he had paid in spades. Anko seemed to take sadistic pleasure in making him spar against her while wearing his weighted leather trench and not slowing her own pace at all to compensate. When the spar had ended, Naruto was cut and bleeding in several places as usual. His wounds were nothing serious this time at least. He thanked the heavens that he had the demon to heal him. Otherwise there was no way he would ever be able to survive this training. The QB had been outright ignoring him these last couple days though. The spike blonde was a bit bothered and hurt about being cold-shouldered but had been too preoccupied with training and missions to resolve whatever issue the demon had taken with him. He missed their wordless conversations. Enough rest. We're ready to try the summoning now. Get your ass up and over here. Naruto had been resting under some trees but stood up and dragged his weary body upright and into the clearing where Anko-sensei was waiting. That weighted trench coat was beginning to irritate him something serious, but he wasn't willing to remove it and look like some pansy. Okay, I'm ready. Whenever you want to start will be good. Anko nodded and moved aside to give them both some room to work. He watched as she did the technique and summoned a large snake that carried a peculiar scroll in its mouth. Naruto took the scroll and signed his name in his blood as the contract procedure stipulated. The demon carrier then rolled the scroll back up and pocketed it in his coat. Alright, that should do it. My own contract with the snakes is only a partial one and I've never actually called the boss out. Still, it can't hurt to try. Throw enough chakra behind the summoning and Manda should sense it and come here. We can only hope he doesn't have an appetite this morning or else he might decide to try and eat us both. Naruto said nothing as he began making the seals. This was a very tough technique, much more draining than the others he regularly used. Once done, he slammed his still bleeding right hand onto the ground and shouted out. Kuchio's no jutsu. A smoke cloud appeared in the clearing and an enormous snake appeared. It had 3 heads and stood taller than most houses in Konoha. The beast looked around in bewilderment and then glanced at the 2 shinobi. That's not Manda, but still a damn good first try. Dismiss it and use more chakra. Naruto did so. The tri-headed serpent hissed as it went away, annoyed with having been called needlessly. Kuchiyose no jutsu. The demon carrier bellowed out the technique as he threw all the chakra he could muster into the summoning. He could sense the QB popping into his conscious mind. The huge chakra pull had apparently roused the demon's attention as he came to see what all the noise was about. This time the smoke cloud was even larger and the summoned serpent was Tannic with a horned head. The creature spoke with an unctuous hissing drawl. Bow down, mortals. Manda is now in your lowly presence. Naruto wasn't particularly surprised that the snake boss could talk, seeing as he communicated with a kitsune on a regular basis. Manda swayed his large head about and tasted the air with his tongue. A moment passed and then it seed its head down to where the demon container and his sensei were standing. Anko was almost in awe. She obviously hadn't expected her charge to actually call the boss. Manda ignored Naruto and concentrated his attention on Anko. You are Orochimaru's disciple, yes. I remember you. I presume your master calls. Anko put a hand on her waist and snarled out a reply. Naruto had never really seen the kunoichi pissed up to that point. I haven't seen that asshole in many years, Snake, and he sure as hell ain't my master. Manda bared his fangs at Anko's blatant disrespect and spat out his own retort. Your petty vendettas do not concern me, little woman. Tell me who summoned me here this instant. My patience wears thin. The spiky blonde raised an eyebrow. This overgrown garden snake had a serious attitude. My companion called you. He wants to make an arrangement with you. Manda paid Anko no more heed and coiled around the pair. Both master and apprentice were now both trapped within a small area and walled inside the great serpent's body. The boss summoned seed its head and stared at Naruto. Several long moments passed and then Manda let out several short choking hisses that sounded similar to laughter. This is a mere hatchling. No weak mortal child could summon the almighty Manda. Naruto closed his eyes and tried not to become angry. He knew that this creature was much stronger than him, even with the demon's chakra, and rousing Manda's ire would mean certain death. He was still exhausted due to having to burn nearly his entire chakra reserve to call the serpent here. I am young as you say, but I did still summon you, great serpent lord. Manda rasped out his hissing laugh again. The hatchling speaks. How very amusing. Allow Manda to see what you really are. The snake brought its head ever so close to Naruto's body. He could almost smell the venom on the serpent's maw as he tasted the air right around the demon carrier. Suddenly Manda's eyes widened a bit and he jerked his head away and stared down at the pair. You stink like the Ninetales, child. The QB's host, you must be. Most intriguing. Naruto wasn't sure, but he thought that he could detect a little hesitation in the great serpent. The QB snarled inside Naruto's mind but said nothing. The demon also seemed to understand that he and his vessel had no chance to survive against Manda should a reckoning occur. He didn't notice Anko bite down on her lower lip when her charge gave no visible reaction to the QB's mention. Manda lolled his head about while he considered the matter and then spoke again. Very well then. Normally I would never consider accepting one so young, but perhaps I might be willing to make an exception and allow you to serve me, little demon. All that we need discuss now is the. Naruto was confused, and said so. I don't understand. Manda shook his great head and laughed again. Foolish child. Serving Manda is a great privilege. You must provide me with living tribute in order to call upon my protection. I will even be benevolent in this case and reduce your initial indulgence. Prepare me a dozen human lives and summon me to consummate our bond, but call me again without my tribute and I will eat you, QB or otherwise. Until then, little one. Manda disappeared as he had come, leaving Naruto and Anko alone again in the training grounds. His purple-haired sensei was almost shocked into silence. We'll stop here today. Good work, kid. I didn't think you'd actually be able to do it. Naruto snided his reply. He might have to make one more hunting trip into the cities. Now all I have to do is dredge up 12 poor bastards to be eaten by some snake. Only Mitarashi Anko would take a statement like that with an apathetic shrug. We'll cross that bridge later. Anyway, go home and get cleaned up. I meant to tell ya this earlier, but we're booked to meet with the Hokage in about 3 hours. He's decided that you're gonna be coming along on a mission with me outside the village in a couple days and he wants to go over the details with you personally. Naruto nodded and obeyed. He hadn't covered much distance when the demon called. This is bad, Gaki. She'll run right to the old man and tell him what the snake said. So you're still alive in there? I don't know what you're talking about. The QB remained silent a long moment and then replied with an enraged whisper in his head. Imbecile. That scaled cretin talked about me. She knows that you're aware of my presence now. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he digested the truth behind the demon's words. He really was in a predicament. Opening parenthesis. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.